Welcome back or welcome to Grateful and Full of Greatness. I'm your host, Mark Lacini. On this podcast, I sit down with guests who, in my opinion, live their lives with the pursuit of greatness in mind. This platform allows me to discuss strategies that go into reaching peak performance. This is episode 52. My guest, Tony Holler, a member of the Illinois Track and Field Hall of Fame. Tony has spoke publicly and consulted on speed training with teams from Major League Baseball, NCAA Football and Lacrosse, national rugby teams, and more. Realizing decades ago that jumpers and sprinters were fast-twitched athletes, he coined the phrase "feed the cats," a coaching philosophy that took above-average athletes and runners to elite velocities. Tony has over 40 years of coaching football, basketball, and track. He recently retired from teaching chemistry after 38 years. He travels overseas, provides content online, and continues to provide full-day workshops around why tired is the enemy and speed is the tide that lifts all boats. It's clear to me that Tony is devoted to making athletes and teams faster. I'm really grateful for his time, so let's dive deeper into his story and perspectives. Tony, thank you so much for taking the time to come on here.
I'm really excited about being on here. I've just been exposed to your podcast, and as we were talking before we started recording, I listened to a couple of them, and I'm a little bit PO'd because I've lost about 50 hours of my life because I'm gonna have to listen to the other 50 now.
Oh man, that really means a lot. I really appreciate it. And we were introduced through Jamie Monroe a couple of years ago, so grateful for the connection if he listens to this. But I want to start off with speed, and I know it's your wheelhouse, and there's a lot of people. Mentors and friends included that believe that speed can't be trained. So I guess why do you believe speed can be trained? And is there a genetic factor that really plays a huge role here?
Without a doubt, if I wanted to have a great track team, I would want the children of Olympians. There's a huge genetic factor in speed. But you know what? For those people who say that track just expresses genetic speed, I think the weight room expresses genetic strength, and the classroom expresses genetic intelligence. We are who we come from, without a doubt. But the real problem, I think, starts with the idea that there's so many people in coaching and in the S&C world who were extremely hard workers, who worked twice as hard as everyone else, and they did not get faster. And so they believe that these people that were faster than them, it must all be genetic, because no matter how hard they worked, they didn't get faster. And here's the problem. They probably overworked. They worked too much. They ran too many laps. They ran too many miles. They spent too many hours in the weight room, because speed can only be improved with microdosing. In my coaching, my speed workouts, and we do 2 or 3 of them a week during the track season, they last no longer than 45 minutes. And during that 45 minutes, my guys are doing about 90 seconds of work. So if we went out and worked 3 hours, we would literally get slower. And so since coaches and S&C people are these grinders, that's who they look for, and that's what they continue to coach. And so they actually detrain speed. Even the genetic speed freaks have been detrained by the work ethic, which is a good thing, of our best coaches.
I will say, Tony, as I was getting ready and researching you and getting ready for this podcast with a bunch of questions, I was just thinking back to the 15-year-old, 20-year-old version of myself who would just run through walls and train. And I really thought that was the only answer. And then I got a sports science coach at Yale University named Thomas Newman, who really started to show me the ins and outs of recovery. And then now, if you would talk to me today, I mean, stress plus recovery equals growth. So I guess, when did that realization hit you? When did this whole idea of microdosing and training for less time, but training for speed really hit you and come into your life?
It really started in 1999. And it's strange because it wasn't because I'd been a terrible track coach. We'd won a couple state championships, but I was 40 years old And my 8th grade son was a terrific athlete and could dunk a basketball in the 8th grade. And he told me, he said, Dad, I'm going to play baseball in high school. Track sucks. And I said, yeah, but, and I just kind of paused. I'm like, it does suck. Why am I doing something the kids don't like? And so I sold out. I just totally sold out. And I said, you know what? We're not going to run anymore. And he said, what? I said, we're not going to run anymore in track. All we're going to do is sprint and jump. Like, really? Like we're not going to run laps? We're never going to run a lap for the rest of my coaching career. And he was like, so here's my idea. By doing that, I'm going to get the good athletes out. And good athletes, I say that every school has a good track team. They're just not out for track because it sucks. And so I'm going to get every good athlete out and then seriously undertrain them, keeping them happy. And we're going to beat people that train correctly because we have better athletes. And to do that, I started training kids kind of like the NFL Combine trains. And that was about the time when personal trainers started working with NFL athletes to get them faster in the 40. So basically, I took a 5 seconds or less training approach. Now, we still had distance runners that went out and did distance work. You know, we're talking about guys that ran the 400 and down. All we did is just pounded speed, and went home fresh. And so what happened, we timed everything. And what I found was everybody got faster. What I found was that the kids that improved the most were the average kids, not the kids that I thought were going to win meets for us. The average kids improved the most. They all loved it. And I think that love is kind of a forgotten ingredient in success. That I have one of my 10 pillars of Feed the Cats is that kids are really good at what they like. And they're obsessed with what they love. So I was creating this love thing. And the thing that probably amazed me more than anything is that we remained elite in the 4x4, in the 400 meters, in a really hard, long sprint. And what I learned was that speed is the key to running a great 400. And if you love what you're doing and you're faster than everybody else, you're going to beat those overtrained athletes. So what I thought was training correctly, I then began to understand that was overtraining. And literally that was the rest of the world. Now, I didn't think, I would ever be on a platform where I could talk about this. But in the last 10 years, the world has changed. I published my own articles. I produced my own content. I've been on over 100 podcasts. And so my stuff has begun to spread. So it's been an interesting thing. And obviously we evolve. It's not a system. It's not an A, B, C, this many reps, this many sets, all that kind of stuff. But I have evolved. I mean, the shirt I'm wearing right now says rest, recovery, sleep. And so, whereas you remember the Pyramid of Success by John Wooden?
Of course.
That was huge. I was a basketball player in the 70s. And so I made my own pyramid. Instead of, I think the normal traditional pyramid is hard work at the bottom, grind. My bottom of the pyramid is rest, recover, sleep, nutrition. That the only way we create high performance is with rest, recovery, sleep, nutrition. That's the only way we create it. And I don't remember anybody ever telling me that when I was in high school.
There's a lot there and I want to unpack it. I mean, the love side of things, I wish more and more I was talking about this on this podcast. And I remember having Anson Dorrance, UNC women's soccer coach, on here, and he was talking about Mia Hamm, love for the ball. And that's one of his more core tenets when he's recruiting. And I was at the ASP conference for sports psychology in Orlando, and Carly Lloyd, one of the best soccer players, was talking about her story, loved the ball. And it's just like, there's got to be something here, right, about this love and how interest becomes obsession. And I think it's obvious in your story, right, how an interest in speed became an obsession for you. One more thought on the rest, recovery, and sleep. I was listening to Christian Blumenfeld on a podcast. Christian Blumenfeld is the best Ironman in the world today. And he's won at every single level, right? Olympic level, 70.3, and then 140. And it's kind of interesting that I'm talking about a long distance athlete right now, but his whole core tenet is I don't really need any massage or recovery techniques. I just need to sleep and have great nutrition. And I thought that was just amazing how basic he was keeping it. But there's two things really that resonated with me in your answer was the love for what you do and putting an absolute value on recovery and sleep. So I guess I want to dovetail right into feed the cats. Where'd you come up with that kind of term? I read the article. I want to share the articles and in the footnotes of this, and I will. But can you talk about the backstory of Feed the Cats?
Yeah, well, when I started to do this, I went to a clinic around this. It's amazing how so many of the dots in our past, come in clumps. I don't know what that is. Steve Jobs said that one of the coolest things is that we can look into our past and see all the dots, the people in the books that changed us, but we can't see them in our future. And so, obviously one of my dots was my 8th grade son, who's now a coach, saying that dad track sucks. Those 4 words changed my life. But I also went to a track clinic and sat in person with a guy named Paul Souza from Wheaton College in Massachusetts. And this guy, I'd never heard of him, never heard of Wheaton College. But this guy was a rock star. I mean, literally, he retired from coaching and went in, was a lead singer in a rock band. So, I mean, this guy had that type of personality. But he said, isn't track great? Isn't track great? We get on the bus and we got the throwers. You got the big burly, gorillas that can, and then we got the distance runners, the thin, like run all day, tough as nails. And then we got the cats. And I thought, damn, that's what I want. I want cats. I want to, and then I thought, I want to train the cats. And somewhere in my head, the word feed came up. I want to feed. And, looking back, people think I'm a master marketer and brander and that kind of stuff. But I'm not. I've been broken in debt almost all my life. But it was an organic brand that really served well. 3 short words, feed the cats. And when you think about, like, let's say your own children, or anybody's kids in sports, wouldn't you like to have a coach that fed them, that nourished them, nourished their spirit, their athleticism, all those things. And I think it's just such a healthy word to feed the cats. And people sometimes say, well, coach, we don't have any cats. We got a bunch of dogs, and so we're just going to have to run their butt off, and we're just going to have to grind. I'm like, is that going to make them more athletic? Cats are athletes, in my opinion. So we want to take the plow horse and make them more cat-like. And, you look at the NFL, the big, slow offensive tackles don't get drafted. It's the athletes that are offensive tackles that get drafted. And the number one, no matter who it is on any of your podcasts, if somebody says, oh, that kid's really athletic, say, define athletic, the first word out of their mouth will be fast. Fast is the number one thing about athleticism, fast. And so we want to make every kid more cat-like. Even the fat 250-pound offensive tackle that not a very good football player yet. If we can get him 2 miles an hour faster, he will be a much better player.
I'll tell you, the first thing that you were bringing up about the difference in different types of athletes, right? You got the burly, you got the strong, and then you have the cats. Really resonates with my sport of lacrosse. I mean, that it was given to us by the Haudenosaunee, and they're really big into anybody can play it. You have the grounding force and the aerial, you have the bear, you have the eagle, and I really like that. It's very inclusive in that nature, and you got to find your niche both in track and field and in lacrosse. And then the next thing you said about coaching, nourishing. And I think about, if you like a flower, you pluck it. And if you love a flower, you nourish it. And I think all while I was preparing for this podcast, you set me, performance over hard work. and kind of this myths about mental training. I mean, of overtraining and conditioning and conditioning and conditioning. And I've always wanted to ask you is when does it borderline into laziness or you're not working hard enough?
Well, that's where Jamie Monroe, who's been so influential in my life, he said to me, yeah, I love everything you do, but you need to stop talking bad about hard work. You need to start saying you're redefining hard work. And I'm like, right, I'm redefining hard work because performance ain't easy. Getting championship sleep, we call championship sleep 9.5 hours a night. And believe it or not, we have high school kids going to bed at 9 o'clock at night to get championship sleep. And it changes their life. So that's hard, and then to come to a 45-minute practice and be on is hard. And you're not going to get faster unless you're fresh, unless you're excited. You have to be on to challenge your CNS. So this whole thing about performance over hard work, I believe the traditional model of sports in America was hard work above all else. There's literally baseball teams that if you can't run a 6-minute mile, you don't make the team. Babe Ruth would not have made his high school team at that high school because they're valuing something other than performance. I'm against conditioning tests. I think conditioning tests are dumb. And I've told Ivy League coaches that statement and they shiver a little bit, because everybody does it. But tradition is a tribe, and we all want to be a part of the tribe. And we all want to do what the great programs do, even though they're probably great programs because they have legendary advantages. And maybe it's not everything they do that created the legendary program. So copying those things, kind of weird. Going back, two short stories. One, when I was wanting to be the greatest basketball player in the world, age 13, 14, in the early 70s, the greatest athletes were boxers. So what did I do? I went out and ran 3 miles on the road, like Muhammad Ali, like Joe Frazier. I lived in my friend's basement. I played basketball for 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, played games 2 hours at night, because I heard that's what Pete Maravich did. I was beat up, run down, sore that whole summer. If I would have been timing myself, I would have been slower. If I would have measured vertical jump, I would not have jumped as high. I was putting hard work above performance because I was a coach's kid. And that's what I learned. Fast forward to almost, 50 years exactly later, I am remote training a 20-year-old in Sweden. At the age of 14, he was the fastest 14-year-old in Sweden. At the age of 17, he was ranked the #1 soccer player in Sweden. And right now he's broken because he listened to all the mythology of Kobe Bryant about getting up at 4 a.m. and getting a couple hours in, and then having breakfast and getting in a couple more hours. He was working 7-hour days, 7 days a week, because he bought into the mythology that that's what made Kobe great. He worked twice as hard as everybody else. That mythology breaks kids. And I cannot stand broken kids. The stories are written by the survivors, by the winners. What we don't see is the number of kids, high school kids, elementary kids that are broken by sports, broken by well-intentioned coaches who are coaching in a traditional way that breaks kids, breaks their spirit or breaks them physically. Right now, we're trying to rehab this phenom soccer player in Sweden. And with a feed the cats approach, we will get him faster. Right now, he's only running 19 miles an hour. And as a 14-year-old, he's running 22 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
That's what happens. Now, if you never measure speed, you never know that. But speed is a barometer of a person's health. If you have a lacrosse team and they're all 2 mile an hour slower at the end of the season, you better wonder what in the heck you've been doing as a coach, because they're not healthy and they're not athletic. So those are the things that that's my answer to the whole work mythology thing. That a lot of people think I'm coaching against hard work, but I'm not. I'm redefining work. And getting back to that love thing is really interesting. A lot of people think that love and sleep are soft. Love is actually one of the toughest things in the world, because we will never fight harder than for something we love. Our kids, you know what I'm saying? I mean, like love is a tough thing. It's not a soft thing. And I just think that more people need to say that.
Championship sleep. I wrote that down and it really resonated with me. I was on an echo bike one time preparing for an upcoming season, and my thoughts just started to run, and I started to think about in shape versus out of shape. And I said, like, maybe 80% of people are more out of shape, so 20% of people are in shape. And then in lacrosse and in sport, are you in game shape? Meaning, can you go to the fourth quarter? Can you thrive in the fourth quarter? And that's game shape. And I started thinking, out of the 20% that are in shape, how many people are in game shape? And I thought like 5%, maybe closer to 1%. And then I came up with an idea as part of my programming now, which is championship shape, right? So it's just like that final frontier beyond game shape. And I think it has something to do with championship sleep. But I've always brought in the mindfulness and mindset and mental side of it. Tony, I want to ask you this question because I had an athlete say to me, Coach, I want to do the short bouts of intensity that you're talking about. 90 minutes or less in the weight room is how I always described it. You don't need to be there for 2 hours or more. But I love running long distance, right? It just helps me. And what comes to mind from the last answer was, if you want to train the body, maybe you should do a short workouts. If you want to train the mind, go far. Would you agree with that, or is that something that you would give pushback to?
I think I am a distance runner. I ran 4 miles this morning. I've run 4 marathons. I still have that 1973, like that's what good athletes did, is they went out and run on the roads forever. So I wish that I would have been feeding the cats for the last 50 years, because I truly believe if you never slow down, you never grow old. It's that speed and weight are the 2 fountains of youth. And maybe sleep. And so yeah, I think, you talk about the fourth quarter, and what came to mind right away, I was doing like a 4-hour consult with the staff at Penn. And it was just fascinating. They were just leaning in on everything and asking perfect questions and all that stuff. And late in the conversation, Mike Murphy said, I love this stuff. I truly believe that this speed stuff might be, the holy grail, that the faster we are at submax speeds. I believe that if a fast athlete's better at their first step, they're better at changing directions. I'm shaking my head. Yeah. And he goes, but this whole thing about doing away with the long stuff, the conditioning, I have to have my guys ready to play 60 minutes in the first game. I just don't see how these 5-second things, are going to, allow us to, be in shape that first game. And I said, yeah, that's probably the number one fear of all coaches, is like, are we in shape? Which is weird. It should be, how good are we? How good are we? Or our performance should be number one. I gave kind of a flippant answer. I said, when do you want to be your best? Game 1 or game 30? He said, well, game 30. I said, well, let the season train the season. I said, what if you came out with a new approach where you weren't in such a damn hurry to get into game shape, and instead focused on the speed of play and the skills of winning? And you entered game 1 with your guys fresh, your guys saying, I love lacrosse more than I've ever loved it. If you entered game 1, maybe in not as tip-top shape, but you had 100% availability. Every single guy was healthy. Now, the traditional team that you're opening with, they were in a hurry to get in shape to play 60 minutes. So they disregard speed. They focused on conditioning. They grinding. Of course, they're going to have a 10% injury rate. Another 10% of the guys are beat up and half limping as they play and everything. Do you have a chance to win? They said, yeah, I think we do. I think we have a chance to win. I go, and then who's better at the end of the season? And, and I don't know if I got through to him or not, but I say that Feed the Cats is revolutionary, but it shouldn't be, because when you hear about these things, they make sense. And of course, then Princeton totally installed, they call it Feed the Tigers. They totally installed it. And within 10 weeks, the average improvement was 1.2 mile an hour, which 1.2 miles an hour, for those people that don't deal in miles per hour, makes a new man out of an athlete. I mean, it's a huge, huge increase. And in 10 weeks, they got that done in the off season. They did no conditioning. I asked Mark Ellis, my contact guy, who's now at Northwestern, only 29 years old. He's a rock star. I asked Mark Ellis, I said, did you guys suffer in the fourth quarter? He said, Coach, we ran circles around people in the fourth quarter. I said, so you mean speed can be seen as being in shape? He goes, I think so. I think so. I think that the fast guys are fast in the fourth quarter. And they happened to go to the Final Four that year for the first time in 18 years.
Amazing. What I'm thinking about is, I've come to realize over the last decade or less that lacrosse is a burst sport, right? It's not that endurance sport like aerobic triathletes. But how do you overcome this tradition? Because you brought it up a couple times, and I think the best programs have a mixture of innovation and tradition, right? So from a standard perspective, this is how we do things. There's culture, there's a legacy, there's people that have come before, standing on the shoulders of giants, sort of tradition that makes programs great. And then this innovation that you're talking about. How hard is it to fight that, whether we're talking about speed or in life, to overcome that tradition?
I think it's really, really hard. I think that our two strongest survival instincts from our early evolution were belonging and competing, which to some people that think that's weird because it's like kind of like opposing, like, wait, like how can you be a competitor and want to beat somebody, but you also want to belong? But you being an athlete and me being an athlete, and so beautifully in the Darren Lowe podcast and the Matt Hasselbeck podcast, all athletes understand you want to belong, you want to be a part of a team, and then you also want to win. You want to be, like Matt Hasselbeck said, you want to be better than your former self. That's competing. But if there's not a little part of you that wants to be better than the guy next to you, you're probably not an athlete. You probably should have gone after the band instead. You probably do not have that DNA. So I do think that you can really go big on team. That's very traditional. You can go really big on competition. That's very traditional. And then you can say, we're not going to condition at the end of class, or at the end of practice.
Right.
And what will happen is your guys won't coast in the first half of practice. And they won't be dreading the end of practice at the second half. What coaches find that Feed the Cats, first of all, they win. And if it didn't win, it would have no wings. If it didn't give you a competitive advantage,
results,
there would be no Feed the Cats. And that's why there's over 100 football schools in Texas, of all places, the most traditional football place in America. They're feeding the cats. They sometimes call it sprint-based football, but they've done away with conditioning. They don't practice on the weekends. Their practices are 90 minutes to 100 minutes. Their coaches have better family lives, and they win. If they didn't win, none of those things would matter, because, as you know, coaches will kill themselves to win. Whatever it takes.
It's a results-oriented business. And you said belonging and competing. The developmental psychologist, John Piaget, said, life is a game and we play inside of a game, whether we know it or not, right? Sport is a perfect platform for that. But in order to win in the games that we play, you have to be able to compete and cooperate. And you use the word belonging, but it's absolutely true. You have to cooperate and be a good teammate, and you have to compete in your role. because we need, we don't, for lacrosse, we don't need the goalie playing attack. You need to cooperate and play your position to give us the best chance to win, right? But you need to compete for your role and then compete to the best of the ability to win against the other team. So I love that. And
just think, not to interrupt you, but just think of why that was important to our survival as cavemen, as when we're on a lifelong camping trip. By belonging, we had a better chance of surviving and having children than if we were a lone wolf out in the woods. Mm-hmm. Secondly, if our group had competitors in it who were trying to create the best shoes, the best clothes, kill the most food, I mean, the competitors made that clan a better clan and ensured their survival. So they needed both. They needed the security of the group, and then they also needed this this tenacious, I want to be the best I can be. They needed both. And so really what we're tapping into when we tap into sports are those two fundamental survival instincts, even though they're not for survival now. It's just for winning a lacrosse game or winning a track meet or winning in life. So I think it's fascinating to understand why we love this stuff.
Well, please don't apologize for cutting me off, because I think that added to the conversation. I would say this. It's almost like we're on a hero's journey, right? Because I remember having Boyd Epley on here. He's a sophomore at Nebraska, starting strength and conditioning in America. And if you were running along, the Charles River in Massachusetts, you would get pulled over because running wasn't a thing that people did, right? So here's this introduction of strength training, and now we're in the 21st century. And you find it becoming pathological. We're overtraining. We're lifting too much. We're running too much. It's become pathological. And so many things have come like that in life. We're having this innovation versus tradition conversation, but it's like, even when I'm talking about mental performance, it's amazing to me that I have to talk about getting to nature and away from technology, right? Because there was this introduction of technology, and now it's gone too far. Right. And one of the healthiest things you can do is get away from it. But it's amazing to have that yin yang of both tradition and innovation. I want to ask this question based upon tradition: is the influences in your life, right? So obviously Feed the Cats has gone to a level that's, nationwide and globally. Right. But what about, you said right before we got on here that your father was a basketball coach. Could you talk a little bit about the biggest influences in your life?
Yeah. And like, everybody has a father-son relationship. I was thinking on my run today, I wonder how many people are successful or unsuccessful based on their father. It kind of cuts both ways. But my father-son relationship with my dad was pretty big because my dad was a first-year coach when I was born, on his way to a 47-year coaching career, 44 years as a head basketball coach, high school and college. And because I was his firstborn, the next two were girls, because I was the firstborn, as soon as I could accompany him, I did. I mean, I literally was his wingman for his entire life. And he confided in me. He was sad in front of me. He worried in front of me. It probably wasn't good because I like owned all of his worries. Like when he lost a game, he was crushed. He did not do a very good job with self-worth. When he lost, he felt like a failure, and so I was way too in tune to him, which is both good and bad. But yeah, he was a huge influence in me. Now, he was traditional. He did some remarkably smart things. Just because you're traditional doesn't mean you do all dumb things. I mean, there's a lot of good tradition out there. He played for an incredible Hall of Fame coach that literally died on the bench with a heart attack in his 33rd year. And my dad was he was such a mentor to my dad that my dad would always tell me that I want to die on the bench like my coach. That's a type of coach I grew up with. So when I said for years I was going to be a doctor and I was pre-med in college, deep down I was a fraud. I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to be broke. I'm going to be in debt. My kids are going to have to borrow $100,000 to go to college, all those things. So yeah, I am here today. If my father would have been a lawyer, my life would have been different. But
And what were the biggest things that you took away from him from a coaching capacity?
I think, first of all, love. He loved what he did. He woke up every day, even the day after a loss, couldn't wait for the next game, couldn't wait for the next practice. One of the things I didn't know about myself until one of my assistant coaches said this on a podcast. He said that I say really good things about people. I've never realized I thought I started thinking about it. Do I really? Because I don't like everybody, but I do say really good things about people when it's true. And my father was that way too. I've never known a coach love his players more than he did. Sometimes there's a love-hate relationship where he'd love his players and they'd hate him. but so I took, I think, those things, and I think I took the joy of competition. And then also, if you're going to coach 47 years, I mean, he coached through he'd already coached for 12 years when he was going through the Vietnam War, and kids started growing out their sideburns, and he said, if you don't cut your sideburns, you're not playing tonight, and those kinds of things. I watched him evolve. From, it's a crazy story, 68 Olympics, when Carlos and Smith put their fists in the air. My dad would send them home. He was offended. He was a patriot. My dad was a patriot. He also hated Cassius Clay when he refused to go to war. He was a patriot. But now those people are his heroes. So I watched him evolve from, like a redneck conservative to a more thoughtful, more liberal minded person. And so I think he gave me the license that I can coach old school for 20 consecutive years, be a poor loser and be proud of it, be a hard worker. This ain't fun. This is a business. We're in the business of winning type of coach. To know practice is going to be the best part of your day. You're going to love track's going to be your favorite sport. Chemistry is going to be your favorite class. Instead of being a taskmaster, because I watched my dad evolve, I've evolved. And that's probably why I'm so coaching, is that I've evolved, and it's more fun for me now than it was when I started.
There's a great TED Talk by Bob Davids, and he's talking about how he learned underneath Bob Townsend, who started Avis Rent-A-Car. It's an exceptional TED Talk that I recommend to a lot of people, because Bob Davids talks about leadership without ego, and how you can manage quality, you can manage time, but you can't manage people, right? And we have managing directors, and that person's a manager, but you can only lead people. Right. And I love this whole idea of leadership, because I see that in the story of you and your father. And if you were to tell me before I hopped on this podcast that we'd be talking so much about love, that blows me away. Right. Because it goes to show that coaching and parenting and teaching and leading is an art and a science, right? You brought up miles per hour and 1.2, right? We talk about the data and the measurements. That's the science part of it. But there is that art of love and getting people to buy in and cooperate and belonging, right? So it takes both. And then the last point you made there really resonated with me. There's no higher compliment in performance psychology than to call somebody an evolved person. Right. So they're really, really extroverted. However, they've learned to spend quality time alone and listen to other people. Right. They're really, really organized, but they've also learned to adapt and be flexible. Right. And I can keep going on and on and on about personality psychology, or going from traditional to innovative. Right. But evolving yourself is really at the core tenet of taking on mental performance training and in sports psychology. So thank you really for taking us on that journey. The next thing I want to ask you is how your chemistry work as a teacher Was there any crossover to your work into Feed the Cats, or would you see those as two separate entities?
No, it's hard. Feed the Cats. I mean, to some people, they think it's like the answer to all things, which means we're kind of like a cult, you know. And and I say that it may be the answer to a lot of things, but a cult believes in a leader that's flawless. And so if I'm the leader of Feed the Cats, this is not a cult. I'm just a flawed human. But it's interesting. Chemistry, track and field. I started as a head basketball coach. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be like my dad. And I was a head basketball coach for about 10 years. I got fired when I was like 31. Just a dumb high school got fired thing. And I had 4 kids and in debt, so I couldn't go be a head basketball coach anywhere else. My wife was a teacher. We were stuck. And so literally that year, a month before I got fired, I got hired as the head track coach. And so I reinvented myself as a track coach. And looking back, chemistry and track fits together so well because chemistry is the most quantitative subject. We basically in chemistry, we try things, we measure things, we write it down, and we learn stuff. And that's kind of what I do in track. We're always measuring stuff. We're always experimenting. Like the people who are addicted to tradition never experiment. And as you know, there's no progress without trying stuff. And you got to be courageous enough to try things. So in that respect, I think, that quantitative stuff I think is pretty huge. But then the more I kept, when I go and present, I'm not a real religious dude or anything, but I kind of present like I'm at a tent revival. I'm trying to change people's lives. There's too many coaches out there quitting the profession because it's miserable. They're having to be a jerk to their team. They have to be a taskmaster, and then they go home and they have a hard time turning it off. They kick their dog and yell at their wife. And that's not healthy. So a Feed the Cats coach gets to have a much better relationship with the team, with the sport, and gets to go home with a happier attitude because basically you start dealing with inspired athletes. And I always say that the best teams have athletes that inspire their coach. And when you inspire a coach, the coach gets better. I mean, simple. So I started taking that to the classroom. And on the first day of chemistry, I would tell the kids that chemistry is going to be your favorite class. And I'm going to be your favorite teacher. That is a bold statement because the average adult, when you say chemistry, probably 60% of them cringe. Like,
it was my least favorite subject in high school.
There you go. So basically I had to take, the stepchild of sports, track and field, and the stepchild of high school academics, chemistry, and try to make it the best part of a kid's life. And when you say that out loud, you automatically hold yourself to a higher standard. It's just like, it's the psychology stuff that you read. I mean, if every day, if a mom wakes up and says, I'm going to be the best mom in the world today, I'm going to be the best mom I've ever been, that's probably going to work out pretty good. Just saying it. And so I would catch myself in chemistry, talking about electron configurations and apologizing to the kids. I said, this is really dry stuff. It's boring. But this is why we have to learn it, because next week we're going to be talking about how atoms bond together. And that's what chemistry is. But we have to understand why they bond together. And I promise you on Friday, we'll blow something up. We'll blow something up on Friday. And in my last 10 years of teaching, I set off 7 fire alarms, which I'm not proud of, but it's kind of like whatever it takes. And to this day, when I see old students of mine say, yeah, I remember when we blew stuff up,
I talk about this a lot, Tony, in my field of influence because I learned about it on a Hazelton Betty Ford webinar. They were talking about three things that lead to behavioral lasting behavioral change. And those three things are standards, action plan, and role models. And it's amazing how you say higher standards, right? This is going to be your favorite class and this is going to be your favorite sport. And you immediately set the standard there, right? Because standards really help people stay accountable, right? And really show up. Big goals don't work unless they have an action plan, right? It's just a wish list without it, right? So you need an action plan. I'm sure Feed the Cats does that really well, right? This is what we're going to do and no more than this, right? There's an action plan. And then to have an exceptional role model like yourself, who's not just making it serious or fun. You're mixing both of those, the serious and the fun. I know this is a topic that you wanted to cover, so I'm going to let you run with it. Could you talk about dopamine, right, and the influence inside of either Feed the Cats or otherwise?
Dopamine's interesting. It's a neurotransmitter that we all have. The word dope in it makes you think it's something you might buy at a head shop or something. But dopamine's a neurotransmitter, and I guess my attraction to dopamine has something to do with my being a chemistry teacher. But literally on my shirt, the middle, the chemical in the middle is dopamine, and so dopamine's really important to athletic performance. And the reason for that is that mentally we get, when we have high levels of dopamine, we are in an excited state that's somewhat where we have reckless confidence. That's not always good. It's probably not good in a casino. You might lose thousands. You may not want to be reckless with your investments. But as an athlete, we need reckless confidence. And the other thing that dopamine allows us to do is move our arms and legs faster, which is pretty essential to human movement. So the question comes, how can we increase that dopamine? And so the two major ways, and my shirt becomes a teaching thing for me, is outdoor living, which is a curse in modern society. We have too many indoor attractions. The temperature, electronics, incredible stuff that we have inside our house. I'll go on a 4-mile run and I will not see another human outside. No one. And it was 58 degrees today in the Chicago area. No, 64 degrees in the Chicago area. No rain. I don't see another human. If it wasn't for dogs, nobody would ever get out of their house in my neighborhood. They have to go out and walk their damn dog. So anyway, sunshine is really, really important for increasing dopamine. And that sunshine is even better if it gets on our skin, our chest, all this, be afraid of the sun stuff. I think someday we're going to think that's crazy. Now, obviously, if you have pale skin and you burn and stuff.
Microdosing.
You need some sun. And they found the early morning sun is the best sun. That you need, if you could get up and walk on a sunny day early in the morning, you're going to be much better off. It increases your dopamine levels and you're going to be more confident.
Regulates your circadian rhythm as well, so you can stay healthy.
Because the other thing with dopamine is sleep. So what happens to people that are indoors all day? They have trouble sleeping. So we need to get outside. And obviously people who live in the Northeast or Chicago area, we have half the year where we have to really work at getting outside. We were born to camp out our entire life. That's what evolution taught us to do. It did not teach us to be comfortable indoors in front of a screen our entire waking life. So I teach athletes, you got to get outside, sun, you got to sleep at night, championship sleep. And then the third thing that's not on my t-shirt is winning. Every time we win, we get a hit of dopamine. We know that winning begets winning, that winners tend to win and continue to win. This is one of the reasons and winning does not have to be winning a race. There's not enough races out there. It doesn't have to be winning the Super Bowl. Not enough people get to experience that. What I teach my people is to start off the day on a winning streak. You shower. The most underrated performance enhancer in the world is a shower. Most kids don't shower before school. You shower, you make your bed, 2 glasses of water, and eat something healthy. You have 4 wins before you go to school. And I'm a huge believer in inertia, that we tend to go in a straight line at a constant speed unless acted upon by an outside force. Well, just think if we could start every day on a winning streak, what that would do to kids, what the attitude they would take into their first period class. I think they're probably going to win first period. Now
Tony, my favorite word in sports psychology is momentum. It's my favorite thing to talk about. And
inertia, the same thing.
The Matthew principles, all what you're talking about. It's in economics, it's true. It's in sports, it's true. To those that have, more will be given to them, and they will have it in abundance. And the sad part about it, which is actually true as well, is to those that don't have, more will be taken from them, and they will lead to ultimate failure. So success and failure are not linear; they're exponential. And winning begets winning. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I absolutely love all these points on dopamine.
Isn't that exciting though? And to realize that it's not just a thought. Okay, I've done a couple of good things today, so that's probably going to continue. Okay, but there's actually a chemical basis that we get a little hit of dopamine. It's kind of like we score a touchdown in our brain when we make our bed.
Well, I think what I'll say is the neuroscientist Andrew Huberman talks a lot about dopamine, and he talks a lot about how this expectancy that comes along with dopamine, right? So it's actually not so great to always be giving yourself the hits no matter what, but really to deprive yourself of the hits. And it's amazing that you and I are talking about outdoor living and nature, right? Isn't that pretty preposterous to be talking about? But I think 50 years ago, we're not having that conversation. You're absolutely right that there's too much attraction to being indoors.
Yeah. And there's too much. I mean, my house is so comfortable. It's always 69 degrees. We need, I don't know if you've read the book, Go Wild by a guy named Rady. But it's fascinating. Basically, he says that all ills of society, I mean, like diseases and stuff, is because we're not out around trees. We're not out in the sun. We need to get wet. We need to get cold. We need to sweat. We really need those things. And I think of the people, if you're not an athlete in high school, which this is a whole different topic. We could do a whole podcast on non-athletes, teenagers. Their life is scary. They don't get outside much. They really don't. And I think their obesity, depression, all those things are going to happen to those people. And you don't have to be outside for 8 hours. I mean, just going on a 4-mile run today for me was a pretty good dose of being outside. And like you say, you will sleep better at night.
Excellent. And space distribution over mass distribution, right? When it comes to working out, it's not a 1 day a week for 9 hours sort of things. That consistency is key. Everybody has it. I guess where I want to take us into the fourth quarter here of our conversation would be, this Feed the Cats has taken on a life of its own, really, and it's really influenced. I know you shared before here that it's saved marriages, right? And it's gone into different sports and things like this. I think, could you just talk about how Feed the Cats started out on this idea, where it is now and where it's going?
Yeah, well, Feed the Cats was just quietly practiced by myself for about 10 years. And then, those things that happen in clumps, I got on Twitter. I thought Twitter was dumb. Like, oh, I'm going outside to mow the yard. Like nobody needs to know that. But what Twitter's allowed us to do is to form networks. I mean, I have 31,000 followers on Twitter. I posted that I like Matt Hasselbeck's podcast. that you did with him, and he liked it. You know, what a world, huh?
Could you share with listeners where they can find you on Twitter?
Yeah, you can just look up Tony Holler, but my handle is my school. My school is Plainfield North, so it's PN Track, at PN Track.
Excellent.
And so what I use is I unintentionally started building a network of people, of like-minded people. And I've written over 300 articles. And I was paid $100 for one of them. So that kind of shows how crazy I am. But that's how you get good at writing, by the way. And that's how I put those articles out to the masses. And, you know, that's why, you know, like obviously people read my stuff enough to invite me to England and Ireland to do workshops. You know, I've done virtual workshops in India, you know, Sweden, Germany, Italy, you know, like, and I'm just a high school teacher. I'm a total nobody in terms of money, power, any of those things. But we live in this world where we have Twitter. You know, like 40 years ago, I would have had to get published by a magazine. You know, that's hard. You know, they didn't publish high school track coaches articles. So anyway, I could write my own blog and tweet it out there. And then people who liked it shared it with others. And then you start building this network. So the network grew. You know, I got asked to speak at the National Lacrosse Clinic, National College Coaches Lacrosse Clinic. And obviously the only guy that's ever spoken there that's never held a stick. You know, that's pretty crazy. And then, you know, within 10 minutes of that airing virtually, Lars Tiffin from Virginia texted me and asked me some questions. And I looked him up, like, is this guy like an assistant somewhere, like a nobody, you know? Oh, okay. He was national champ last year. Yeah, that was the year that Virginia had won. I'm like, oh gosh, this might have had some reach, you know? And then a year later, Jamie Monroe has me on his podcast, and somehow, like, you know, we become like lifelong friends, you know, in a 3-year period. So weird. Matt Tellerico, S&C guy with the Yankees, changed everything he does with the Yankees based on Feed the Cats. It's been crazy. But the thing I want to mention about the wife, 2 great stories from the same school, Muscuda High School in Southern Illinois. This guy says, I was a total Neanderthal. I was a total meathead. I did everything the old way. If we lost, we practiced 4 hours. If we won, we practiced 3. We came in on Saturday mornings. I ran the guys at 7 a.m. because I wanted to toughen them up. And he said, I started feeding the cats. So no conditioning, short practices, nothing on weekends, blah, blah, blah. The first thing I want to tell you is last night, my guy had 317 yards rushing, 317, and we're 4-0. I said, Coach, was that guy gassed at the end of the game? He goes, oh my God, Coach, he was so tired from that 33rd carry, but you know what? He still gained 21 yards. And this is the key. This is the key. There's nothing I could have done during the week that would have made him fresh on the 33rd carry.
That's right.
Nothing. And maybe you could have worn him down where he would have sucked the entire game, but there's nothing. And then he said, here, let me tell you another story. I got a letter from one of my assistant coaches' wives, said that the new program had saved their marriage. And I'm like, sure it did. That guy's going home happier every night. He's going home earlier. Every football coach preaches God, country, family. Not in that order, but God, country, family. And then they are an absolute narcissistic nut job their entire 6 months a year. Feed the Cats gives that guy license to be a good dad and a good husband again. And he goes home with a good attitude because his athletes have inspired him. He didn't have to push his athletes. The athletes felt pulled by the love of the game. So I think those things are really powerful. And when people hear those things, they're like, and this can actually help us win. I'm like, hell yeah. and so that's, I think, how it got wheels and all that kind of stuff. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because sometimes I tell fellow cult members that we're changing the world one coach at a time. And it's kind of fun.
I'll tell you, Tony, I was in lockstep with everything that you said, and the only thing that I disagree with is that you're a nobody. Winning begets winning, and when Jamie Monroe told me about how many athletes and coaches you've been influencing and inspiring, I look forward to one day reading your book, "That Tired is the Enemy." And I'm a firm believer in what you're talking about because of the sleep, rest, and recovery that have become so influential in your model of feed the cats. I'll finish with this. I always ask guests on how they define greatness, what it looks like to them, and what are the best all have. And I think I know where you would go, but I don't want to assume anything. So, in your experience of such a long coaching career through Feed the Cats, how would you define greatness? What do they all have in common?
I don't think I'm very good at saying that, because for some reason my mind went right to my dad. My dad's 88 with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. He weighs 140. He's been on his deathbed for like 5 years. When he finally dies, and because he's been dying for so long, I think about what I'm going to say, and I think he won 670 games and lost 450 or something like that. But I don't think that matters to him. I think that every coach, I remember Valvano saying that when I get out of coaching, it's not the games, it's the locker room I'll miss, So when it really comes down to it, it's corny as heck. So I hate to be corny, but it's the relationships, the friendships, and never forget the stories. Mm-hmm. Every great coach, every great athlete, they all have stories that make, you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
Like when I get around other coaches, I'm in trouble because I'm going to stay up way too late, because I cannot stop listening to great stories that I think that we are privileged to have lived through, that I really don't believe that the average human gets to live through the stories that we get to live through. Good and bad, funny, heartbreaking, all those things. So yeah, I think when my dad finally leaves, it will be like he touched a bunch of people. He loved his players. His players loved him. He had great friends. He told great stories. So by the way, he's going to die with penniless. I mean, like it costs $5,000 a day for somebody to take care of him, and they have no money. It's hard for old people. And so I know for sure that money, wealth is not greatness. I know that, even though it's more fun to have money. But yeah, I think greatness comes down to, the stuff you leave behind and the stories you can tell.
I think, first of all, wealth is what's left when all the money's taken away from you. God bless your father. I don't know if you know this. He struck a chord with me with the Jim Valvano. His quote is up on my foundation page, Meaningful Growth Foundation, to help cancer patients afford the treatments that they're going through. Jimmy Valvano's SB speech is one of the greatest speeches of all time. And I really want to thank you for your introspection, all the things that you shared here, your humility, your innovativeness. And I guess, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Not really. Just to value performance and feed the cats.
Outstanding. For more information, they can go follow you on Twitter. Is there any other place I can send them?
If you Google Tony Holler, my son Troy runs this is funny, my YouTube account, my Insta, my TikTok, my Threads, and whatever else is out there. and he's a digital content guy. I don't even know what those things are, but literally, if you Google Tony Holler, there's more to look at than you want to see, probably.
Thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to the future of talking more about this.
Mark, thank you so much. I love it.